The Messerschmitt's cannon shells ripped past the canopy so close that Lieutenant David Archer felt the pressure wave slap against the plexiglass. His P-47 Thunderbolt shuddered, oil temperature spiking, altitude bleeding. 4 Focke-Wulf 190s closing from above and behind, their lead pilot already lining up the killing shot. Every manual, every instructor, every combat veteran said the same thing. Throttle forward, dive hard. Use the Thunderbolt's weight to outrun them. Archer's hand moved to the throttle, then stopped. He pulled it back instead. The engine note dropped. Airspeed falling. The enemy fighters screamed closer. What happened in the next 11 seconds would be examined in tactics briefings across 3 air forces for the next 40 years. If you want more true stories of impossible moments from World War II, subscribe to the channel. March 1944. The skies over occupied France had become a killing floor. Allied bombers were pushing deeper into German industrial heartland every week, and the Luftwaffe was bleeding them white. Fighter escorts could only go so far before fuel limits forced them to turn back, leaving the heavy bombers naked for the final leg. The Air Force needed range. They needed endurance. They needed pilots who could think 3 moves ahead when the enemy had altitude, numbers, and home field advantage. What they got, in many cases, were farm boys and college kids with less than 200 hours in type. David Archer was both. 23 years old, raised outside Lincoln, Nebraska, son of a high school mathematics teacher. He'd logged more hours reading aerodynamics textbooks than he had in actual dogfights. When he arrived at the 56th Fighter Group in England that winter, the other pilots noticed 2 things immediately. He asked too many questions, and he didn't drink. In a squadron culture built on instinct and bravado, Archer was the guy who sketched turning diagrams on napkins and mumbled about energy states during poker games. His squadron mates called him Slide Rule. Not as a compliment. His flight commander was Captain Roy Howell, a Texas ranch hand with 12 kills and a scar across his knuckles from a bar fight in Piccadilly. Howell flew on instinct and guts. He trusted his eyes, his hands, and his wingmen. He did not trust bookworms. During Archer's first week, Howell had watched him spend an entire briefing scribbling notes about stall speeds and turn radii while the rest of the squadron talked about German tactics. Howell leaned over and said, "You planning to outthink a 190, Lieutenant, or outfly it?" The room laughed. Archer didn't look up. He just kept writing, but he also kept flying, and he kept coming back. The mission on March 14th was supposed to be a standard bomber escort. 12 P-47s from the 56th would shepherd a formation of B-17s to a ball bearing plant outside Stuttgart, stay with them until the initial bomb run, then break off and sweep for targets of opportunity on the return leg. The weather forecast called for broken clouds at 8,000 feet, clear above. Good visibility, good hunting. Howell led the flight. Archer flew as his wingman, tucked in tight on the right side, scanning the sky in quadrants the way the manual said. They climbed out over the channel just after dawn. The bombers were already stacked up in their combat box, 50 heavy machines droning east in tight formation. The fighters wove above them, 4 ship elements scissoring back and forth across the bomber stream. Archer kept his scan going. High 6, low 9. Check the sun. Check the contrails. His oxygen mask smelled like rubber and old sweat. The engine vibration traveled up through his boots and into his spine. Everything was noise and cold and gasoline fumes. They crossed into French airspace at 22,000 feet. The first call came at 0817 hours. Bandits. High 11 o'clock. 12 plus. Howell's voice, calm and flat. Archer's eyes snapped left and up. There. Sunlight glinting off metal. A loose formation of German fighters, stepping down out of the high cirrus layer, like wolves cutting a herd. Focke-Wulf 190s. Fast, brutal, heavily armed. They weren't going for the bombers. They were going for the escorts. Blue flight, push up. Engage before they get a run. Howell shoved his throttle forward. Archer followed. The Thunderbolt's big Pratt and Whitney engine roared as the RPM climbed. Airspeed building. The altimeter unwound as they nosed over slightly to gain speed. Archer's heart rate didn't spike. It steadied. He'd read about this. the body's sympathetic response under combat stress. Tunnel vision, time distortion, auditory exclusion. He made himself blink, made himself breathe, made himself see the whole picture. The German formation split. Half dove toward the bombers. The other half turned into the climbing P-47s. A classic bracket maneuver. Forced the escorts to commit, then hit them from two sides. Howell saw it too. Stay tight. We take the high group. They closed fast. 1,000 yards. 800. Archer armed his guns. The reflector sight glowed faintly on the windscreen. He picked a target, a 190 slightly behind the formation, and watched its wings for the first sign of a turn. German pilots were good. They didn't wait for you to set up. They dictated the fight. 600 yards. The lead 190 rolled inverted and pulled through. Howell followed, hauling the Thunderbolt into a hard slicing turn. Archer stayed glued to his wing, pulling GS, feeling the blood drain toward his boots. The horizon spun. Sky, ground, sky again. Tracers flickered past, bright little lines of physics trying to intersect his flight path. He ignored them. Focus on Howell. Protect his six. That's the job. The Germans scattered into individual knife fights. Suddenly the sky was full of twisting, turning machines, each one trying to get angles on another. Archer broke left as a 190 flashed in front of him. Too fast for a shot. He reversed, pulling hard, watching his airspeed bleed off. The Thunderbolt didn't turn like a Spitfire. It was heavy, brutish, built for straight-line speed and diving attacks. If you tried to turn with a 190, you died. So you didn't turn with them. You extended. You separated. You used your speed to reset. Archer saw Howell ahead, locked in a climbing spiral with two 190s. They were gaining angles. Howell's plane was starting to wallow at the top of each loop, losing energy. Archer pushed his throttle forward and angled up, trying to relieve the pressure. One of the Germans saw him coming and peeled off, turning hard into Archer's nose. A head-on pass. Insane closure rate. Both aircraft hurtling toward each other at a combined 700 miles per hour. Archer didn't flinch. He put the pipper on the 190's nose and pressed the trigger. The Thunderbolt shuddered as all 8.50 caliber guns opened up. Bright flame and smoke poured from the wing roots. The recoil slowed the aircraft slightly. Tracers reached out, falling just short. The 190 fired back, its 20mm cannons winking orange. Shells cracked past Archer's left wing. He held the trigger down. Distance collapsing. 300 yards. 200. The 190 broke first. It snap-rolled right in dove. Archer let it go and reversed toward Howell. But Howell was already clear, the second German trailing smoke and falling away in a slow spin. Howell's voice came through, slightly breathless. Blue 2, status? I'm good. Still with you. We're getting separated. Reform high at Angels 20. Archer scanned for threats, found empty sky, and started climbing. His engine temperature was high, but manageable. Fuel was good. Ammo down to 60%. He checked his 6, then his 12, then quartered the sky again. No contacts. The fight had scattered across 10 cubic miles. He nosed over slightly to build speed, trimming the aircraft to reduce stick pressure. His breathing was steady inside the mask. Cold air whistled through a gap somewhere in the canopy seal. That's when he saw them. 4 dots, high into the east, moving fast. Coming out of the sun. He keyed the radio. Blue lead, blue 2. Bandits 4 o'clock high. 4 contacts. A pause. I don't see them. They're above the haze layer. Moving west. Another pause. Howell's frustration leaked through. Blue 2, get your eyes checked. I've got nothing on scope. But Archer knew what he saw. And 30 seconds later, Howell saw them too. 4 Focke-Wulf 190s in a loose finger 4, cutting across their flight path at 28,000 feet. They'd climbed out of the fur ball and repositioned. Textbook German tactics. Get high, get fast, get the kill. And they'd seen the 2 separated P-47s. Blue 2, break right. We extend east. Archer rolled right and pushed the throttle to the stop. War emergency power. The engine bellowed. Airspeed climbed past 300 knots. But the 190s were already diving, converting their altitude into crushing speed. Archer glanced back. They were closing. Fast. Howell was ahead and slightly low, heading for a cloud deck that might give them cover. Archer angled to follow, but he could see the geometry. The Germans would intercept before they reached the clouds. Blue 2, they're on you. Brake left, brake left. Archer broke hard. The horizon tumbled. G-forces crushed him into the seat. His vision grayed at the edges. He gasped against the pressure, tightening his stomach muscles, forcing blood back to his brain. The 190s followed, splitting into pairs. 2 stayed high. 2 followed him into the turn. They had him bracketed. This was it, the killing box. 1 pair would overshoot. The other would lag back and wait for him to straighten out. No matter which way he turned, someone had a shot. Howell was too far to help. The clouds were still 10 seconds away, and 10 seconds was a lifetime. Archer's hand hovered over the throttle. Every instinct, every training flight, every combat report said the same thing. Speed is life. You run. You dive. You use the Thunderbolt's weight and power to get separation. Never, ever slow down in a fight. But Archer had read something in a Luftwaffe tactical manual captured after North Africa. He'd sketched it out on paper during a sleepless night in the barracks. He'd even asked his flight instructor about it once, and the man had laughed. That's how you get killed, son. Maybe. Or maybe it was how you survived. The lead 190 was 200 yards back, closing fast. His wingman stacked high and right. Archer could see the muzzle flashes starting. Cannon shells walked toward him, bright dots against the gray sky. His engine was screaming, oil pressure spiking. The stick shook in his hand. He pulled the throttle back. The engine no-dropped. The airspeed bled off. 30 knots. 40. The Thunderbolt shuddered as it approached the edge of its performance envelope. The 190 behind him exploded forward. His closure rate suddenly tripled. Too fast. The German pilot saw it happening and tried to adjust, hauling back on the stick. But physics doesn't negotiate. He flashed past Archer's right side, overshooting by 200 feet. Archer rolled inverted and pulled. The world spun. The second 190 tried to follow, but his angle was wrong now. His speed too high. He shot past as well, his wingman swearing in German over an open radio channel. Archer rolled wings level, shoved the throttle forward, and dove. The engine roared back to life. Airspeed building. The 2 190s overhead tried to reposition, but they'd lost their setup. Archer extended east, pouring on speed, the Thunderbolt doing what it did best, running like a freight train in a straight line. He glanced back. The Germans were following, but they'd lost their altitude advantage. The fight had reset, and now Howell was coming back. Blue 2, what the hell did you just do? Archer didn't answer. He was already looking for the next move. The 190s were still faster in level flight, but they'd burned energy overshooting. If he could get them to commit again, make them turn, he could bleed them down further. He needed them frustrated, impatient. He throttled back again, just slightly, enough to let them close. They took the bait. The lead 190 nosed over, trying for a high-side gun pass. Archer waited until the German committed, then broke hard into him. The 190 tried to follow, but his speed was too high. He sailed past again, and this time Archer reversed inside his turn. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, the German's belly was exposed. Archer put the sight on him and fired. The guns hammered. Shells tore into the 190's fuselage. Metal peeled. Smoke poured from the engine. The German rolled hard and dove away, trailing black. The wingman broke off immediately. The 2 high 190s, seeing the fight turn, reversed course and climbed back into the sun. In 15 seconds, the sky was empty. Archer leveled out, breathing hard. His hands were shaking now, adrenaline finally catching up. He checked his gauges. Engine temperature redlined, oil pressure fluctuating, fuel low. He needed to get home. Howell pulled alongside, staring at him through his canopy. He keyed the radio. Explain. Now. Archer took a breath. Energy trap. They had speed advantage, but no turning room. I gave them what they expected. then removed it. They couldn't correct in time. Silence. Then, where the hell did you learn that? A book. Howell didn't respond. They turned west and headed for home. The debrief room smelled like coffee and cigarette smoke. Archer sat in a metal folding chair, his flight suit still damp with sweat, and watched the intelligence officer sketch the engagement on a blackboard. Captain Howell stood near the window, arms crossed, saying nothing. The other pilots filtered in, their faces showing the particular kind of exhaustion that comes from 4 hours of high-altitude combat. 2 planes hadn't come back. Nobody talked about them yet. The intelligence officer, a major named Cullens, tapped the board with his chalk. So you throttled back, in a stern chase, with 4 hostiles inside firing range. Archer nodded. Yes, sir. And your reasoning? The 190 has a higher critical Mach number in a dive, but inferior energy retention in the vertical. If I maintain cruise power, they'd eventually bracket me. If I extended at full throttle, I create separation, but they'd retain altitude advantage for a second pass. Reducing power created a temporary closure rate problem for the trailing aircraft. They overshot. I regained initiative. Cullen stared at him. You regained initiative by slowing down. By controlling their closure rate, sir. Yes. One of the other pilots, a lieutenant named Vickers, laughed. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Howell finally spoke. It worked. The room went quiet. Howell pushed off from the window and walked to the board. He picked up the chalk and drew 2 aircraft. Every German pilot is trained to expect speed. They set up their attacks based on predictable behavior and drew 2 aircraft. Every German pilot is trained to expect speed. They set up their attacks based on predictable behavior. Throttle up, dive away, extend. They know the angles. They know the timing. He drew pursuit curves. Archer gave them the setup they wanted, then changed the equation. Their closure rate went from manageable to catastrophic in about 3 seconds. They had 2 choices, overshoot or collide. They overshot. Cullens frowned. This isn't in any doctrine manual. No, sir, Archer said quietly. It's from a Luftwaffe training document, captured in Tunisia. I read it in the library at Langley before deployment. Vickers leaned forward. You're telling me you used a German tactic against Germans? I used physics, sir. The nationality doesn't matter. Energy state, closure rate, and turning radius are constant regardless of who's flying. Howell looked at Archer for a long moment. Then he turned to Cullens. I want this written up. Full tactical analysis. If it works once, it'll work again. Cullens nodded slowly. I'll send it up to 8th Air Force headquarters, but I'm not guaranteeing they'll buy it. They did. 3 weeks later, a tactics bulletin circulated through every fighter group in England. It didn't mention Archer by name. It simply outlined a defensive maneuver for high-speed stern attacks. Controlled deceleration to force pursuit overshoot, followed by immediate offensive reversal. The bulletin noted that the technique required precise judgment and should only be attempted by experienced pilots in specific circumstances. It was labeled experimental. But pilots talked. Word spread. The guy from the 56th who slowed down instead of speeding up. The bookworm who'd read his way into a kill. By April, Archer wasn't slide rule anymore. They called him Professor. And this time it wasn't an insult. He flew 23 more missions that spring. He didn't use the throttle-back maneuver again until May. The mission was a fighter sweep ahead of a bomber stream targeting oil refineries in the Ruhr Valley. 16 P-47s, divided into 4 flights, pushing deep into German airspace. The Luftwaffe had pulled back most of its fighter units to protect industrial centers, which meant the air battles were more concentrated, more vicious. You didn't see enemy fighters for hours. Then suddenly you were in the middle of 30 of them. Archer was flying element lead now, with a young pilot named Kowalski on his wing. Kowalski was 19, fresh out of training, with exactly 42 combat hours. He asked a lot of questions. He reminded Archer of himself 6 months earlier. Howell, now a major with 19 kills, led the squadron. They crossed into Germany at 26,000 feet. Visibility was perfect. The ground below was a patchwork of green fields and gray towns. stitched together with rail lines and rivers. Archer scanned the sky. High contrails to the north, probably friendlies. A weather front building to the west. He checked his fuel, checked his oxygen, checked Kowalski's position. The kid was tight on the wing, exactly where he should be. Howell's voice came through. All flights, heads up. Radars painting multiple groups, forming up ahead. Expect contact in 5 minutes. Archer keyed his mic. Blue flight copies. Kowalski's voice, shaky. Blue 4. Do we go after them or wait? We wait, Archer said calmly. Let them commit first. Watch their angles. Don't chase. Copy. The minutes crawled. Archer's breathing filled his mask. The engine droned. His eyes quartered the sky, quadrant by quadrant, searching for the telltale glint of metal, the dark speck that didn't belong. There. 11 o'clock, slightly high. Multiple contacts. Coming south. Blue lead, blue 3. Bandits 11 o'clock high. Count 8. Howell. Confirm. All flights, push up. We take them before they set up. The P-47s climbed. Archer added power smoothly, watching his manifold pressure, keeping Kowalski in his peripheral vision. The German formation spread out as they approached. FW-190s again. They'd learned to respect the Thunderbolt's firepower, so they didn't joust head-on anymore. They slashed, broke, and repositioned, fast and opportunistic. The two formations merged at 28,000 feet. Chaos. Aircraft everywhere, turning, climbing, diving. Tracers ripped through the air in bright geometric patterns. Archer picked a target, a 190 braking right, and followed him into a descending spiral. Kowalski stayed with him. Archer fired a burst. Missed. The 190 reversed hard, but Archer had expected it. He'd already started his own reversal, using the Thunderbolt's weight to pull inside the turn. The German saw it happening and tried to extend, but Archer had the angle now. He fired again. Hits sparkled along the 190's wing route. The German rolled inverted and split SD toward the deck, trailing smoke. Archer pulled out and climbed. Blue 4 status? No response. Kowalski check in. Static. Then a strained voice. Blue 3, I've got 2 on me. I can't shake them. Archer's head snapped around. There, 2,000 feet below, Kowalski's P-47 in a hard defensive turn. 2 190s stacked behind him, methodically closing the angle. The kid was doing everything right, but he didn't have the experience to see the trap. They were herding him lower, bleeding his energy, waiting for the moment he ran out of airspeed and ideas. Blue 4 extend east. Full throttle. I'm coming. But even as Archer nosed over, he saw a third 190 diving in from above, setting up for the kill shot. Kowalski didn't see him. The geometry was perfect. The German pilot was good. Very good. He'd waited for the exact moment when Kowalski was locked in his turn, committed, unable to respond. Archer shoved the throttle to the firewall and dove. The airspeed indicator spun. 300 knots. 400. The Thunderbolt howled. Wind screamed past the canopy. He was closing, but not fast enough. The German was already in firing position. Archer saw the muzzle flashes. Kowalski, brake right now. The kid broke. The first burst missed by inches, but the German adjusted, his tracers following Kowalski's turn. The second burst hit. Archer saw the strikes, bright flashes along the fuselage. Smoke poured from Kowalski's engine. The plane shuddered, lost speed, and started to fall. Archer screamed down at the attacking 190. He had one chance, one angle. He put the Pipper ahead of the German's flight path and fired. The deflection was insane, almost 90 degrees, but the closing speed was so high that his bullets and the 190's flight path intersected for a fraction of a second. Shells tore through the German's cockpit. The 190 snapped into a spin and fell away. But now Archer had all 3 of them on him. The 2 trailing 190's had broken off Kowalski and reversed onto Archer. He was low, fast, and alone. Kowalski was out of the fight, descending on a dead engine, probably heading for a bailout. Howell was 3 miles away, engaged with his own problems. Archer pulled hard, trying to extend, But the Germans were faster here, meaner, and they'd seen what he'd done to their wingman. They wanted payback. Archer reversed into them, forcing a head-on pass. They scattered, regrouped, and came again. He turned into the second attack. They split, one high, one low. Classic bracket. He broke toward the low man, but the high man rolled in behind him. Cannon fire raked his right wing. Metal tore. The Germans pressed. They knew he was hurt. They could see the smoke. They closed in for the kill, one behind, one above, coordinating their attack. Archer's options collapsed. He was too low to dive, too slow to run. His right aileron was damaged, limiting his roll rate. He looked at his throttle, and he thought about energy states, closure rates, and pursuit geometry. He thought about an obscure paragraph in a captured manual, written by a Luftwaffe instructor who'd probably died over Stalingrad. He thought about the fact that being predictable gets you killed. He pulled the throttle back. The engine note dropped. Airspeed bled off. The 190 behind him, already committed to a high-speed gun pass, suddenly had a closure problem. Too fast. Too close. Archer felt the Germans' frustration through the physics of it. The 190 tried to slow, popping his speed brakes, but momentum doesn't care about intent. He flashed past Archer's canopy so close that Archer saw the pilot's face, saw his wide eyes, saw the exact moment he realized he'd been suckered. Archer rolled inverted, pulled through, and fired. The burst caught the 190 from below, tearing into the belly, the engine, the cockpit. The aircraft disintegrated in a ball of orange flame. Pieces tumbled past Archer's wing. He rolled upright, shoved the throttle forward, and pulled into the vertical. The second 190, the high man, tried to follow, but his energy state was wrong. He'd been setting up for a slashing attack on a target that was supposed to be running. Now that target was climbing, accelerating, and shooting. Archer came over the top of a Cuban 8, half-rolled, and dove back down. The German saw him coming and broke hard, but Archer had the angle, the speed, and the will. He fired. The 190's canopy exploded. The aircraft rolled onto its back and fell toward the ground, trailing smoke and debris. Archer leveled out at 2,000 feet. His hands were shaking again. His engine was coughing, cylinder head temperature through the roof, oil pressure dropping. He'd taken hits somewhere in the coolant system. He needed to get home. Now. He keyed the radio. Blue 4, do you copy? Silence. Then faint. I'm here. I'm down. Field about 2 miles south of Aachen. Locals are coming. I don't know if they're friendly. Archer closed his eyes briefly. Can you evade? I'll try. Do better than try. Move east. Find a forest. I'll get word to search and rescue. Copy. And, Professor. Yeah, thanks. Archer didn't respond. He turned west and nursed his dying aircraft toward the channel. The engine seized twice. He coaxed it back both times, babying the throttle, adjusting the mixture, talking to the machine like it could hear him. Maybe it could. Maybe it understood that both of them needed to survive the next 30 minutes, or none of this mattered. He made it back. He landed at an emergency strip on the coast, the Thunderbolt trailing smoke, the engine knocking like a broken drum. The crew chiefs ran out to meet him. When he climbed out of the cockpit, his legs almost gave out. One of the chiefs whistled at the damage. 67 holes in the airframe. Right aileron barely attached. Oil cooler shredded. Sir, how the hell did you fly this thing home? Archer leaned against the wing. Carefully. Kowalski made it out. A Belgian resistance cell found him, hid him for 3 days, and smuggled him to Allied lines. He was back in England 2 weeks later. When he saw Archer in the mess hall, he walked over, stood at attention, and said, I owe you my life. Archer looked up from his coffee. You owe me better situational awareness. Check your 6 every 3 seconds. Not every 5. 3. Kowalski grinned. Yes, sir. The tactical bulletin was updated in June. The throttle reduction maneuver, now called the energy trap reversal, was included as an advanced defensive technique. Training squadrons in the States started teaching it. By August, 3 more pilots had used it successfully in combat. By the end of the war, it had been adopted by P-51 squadrons, integrated into British Spitfire tactics, and even analyzed by Soviet air units flying Yak-9s on the Eastern Front. Archer flew until February 1945. 72 missions, 11 confirmed kills. He never became an ace. He never wanted to. He went home to Nebraska, finished his degree in aeronautical engineering, and spent 30 years designing high-performance aircraft for the Air Force. He never talked about the war much. When people asked, he'd shrug and say he'd been lucky. But the pilots who flew with him knew better. Luck doesn't pull the throttle back when 4 fighters have you locked. Luck doesn't turn physics into a weapon. Luck doesn't read manuals written by the enemy and figure out how to use them better than the people who wrote them. That wasn't luck. That was intellect, timing, and the kind of cold courage that doesn't announce itself with bravado but proves itself in the moment when every instinct says run and the mind says wait. The Germans who survived the war and later spoke about aerial combat remembered certain Allied pilots. The aggressive ones, the naturals, the killers. But they also remembered a few who fought differently, who seemed to think 3 moves ahead, who turned every attack into a puzzle and every puzzle into a trap. They remembered the ones who made them feel outsmarted. David Archer was one of those. In 1978, a Luftwaffe veteran named Klaus Hoffmann published a memoir about his experiences flying FW-190s over Western Europe. In one chapter, he described an engagement in May 1944 where he and his wingman had pursued a damaged P-47 at low altitude. They had every advantage: altitude, speed, numbers, position. The American should have been an easy kill. Hoffmann wrote. He slowed down. I could not believe it. Every pilot knows you do not slow down in a stern chase. But he did. And in doing so, he made me fast when I needed to be patient. I overshot. My wingman overshot. And then he was behind us, and Werner was dead, and I was running for my life. I never saw that American again, but I never forgot him. He taught me that the deadliest weapon in the sky is not the gun or the engine. It is the mind. If you enjoy real World War II stories, where skill and courage change history, subscribe for more. Wars are won by nations and factories and the weight of steel. But battles are won by individuals in moments that last seconds. The difference between survival and death is often a single decision, made under pressure, against instinct, with no guarantee of success. History remembers the big victories, the famous aces, the dramatic speeches. But the real story is quieter. It's a young man from Nebraska pulling back a throttle when everything in him screams to push it forward. It's the willingness to be wrong in order to be alive. It's the understanding that sometimes the smartest move looks like the dumbest one, right up until it works. David Archer understood that. And because he did, he came home.